As he reflected on his thoughts, his mind drifted back to when he had first touched the nine-colored gem. Instantly it felt as though he had been transported into a dreamlike world, a place so surreal that he now wondered if it might be connected to the ancient dragon clan. His thoughts raced back to the moment when he saw the fall of the dragon god. When he had woken from that dream, he had noticed something had shifted within him. The swirling bloodline energy in his chest, which had once been chaotic, was now calm and stable. And when he had summoned his spiritual power, the gem had transformed into a scale that shone with those same 9 colors. During that brief state, he had barely been able to wield the heavenly sacred abyss-splitting halberd. But even in that weakened form, the power had been undeniable. He remembered how the transformation had only lasted about 10 seconds, yet the impact had been immense. He wondered whether this change was due to a mutation in his bloodline or perhaps a fusion with his martial soul. He realizes that those 9-colored scales were just like the dragon gods. The thought made him certain of one thing: this transformation needed a name, and so he decided to call it the Dragon God Transformation. A sense of satisfaction swelled within him, as finally, it seemed, he had an attack skill worth using, something that could make him a true force to be reckoned with. Yet, as he sat down to rest, reality sank in. He was still far too weak. The energy from the vortex had completely drained him and left him exhausted. He lay back on the ground as he knew that his next step must be to return to the Sea God Lake for more cultivation. With this gem, now named the Dragon God Gemstone, he believed his bloodline might one day truly evolve into that of the Dragon God. But one question lingered. Why had his blue silvergrass martial soul been able to awaken the gem's power in the first place? As the evening deepened into night, the question remained in his mind, unanswered but persistent. After a night spent deep in cultivation, Zhuan Yu felt the familiar pull of his bloodline vortex slowly returning, though its energy was only restored by a third. The soft rays of the morning sun filtered through the room as he rose to his feet. He glanced at the black insignia in his hand and reflected on how it had absorbed all of the life energy stored within, yet still managed to restore only a fraction of his strength. It became clear to him that another visit to Sea God Lake was essential. As he stepped outside the dorm, the morning air greeted him, and his gaze immediately landed on Lei, who stood nearby with an enthusiastic smile and waved at him. He approached him and commented on how early he had arrived. Lei told him that he simply couldn't wait any longer and urged Zhuan Yu to hurry so they could seek out his teacher without further delay. At the academy, Luo Hong struggled to hold a heavy yawn as she cast a tired glance towards Lei. She complained that he had better have something important to share, for disturbing a beautiful woman's sleep this early in the morning would have been unforgivable. Lei tried to hold back his excitement as he held a small box. He assured her that what they had brought was truly significant. He then told her that they had picked up a special item at the Shrek auction the day before. He tossed a coin into the air, and as it shone brightly, a green pouch appeared before them. Luo Hong blinked in surprise and wondered aloud that this particular antique was still in serviceable condition. As she took in the sight of the pouch, her expression shifted to one of astonishment. She snatched the pouch, and her fingers trembled with excitement as she tried to open it. She muttered that it was life ivy, and so many of them. Zhuan Yu watched her reaction closely and couldn't help but feel that this pouch must be something extraordinary. She then turned to Lei and told him that she was tempted to just keep it for herself. She then asked him if he even knew what was inside the pouch. He confidently replied that he had seen it, and there was a small living gorilla inside. She nodded thoughtfully and acknowledged that the pouch was indeed made from life ivy and seemed too extravagant. Her gaze then fell upon the baby gorilla nestled inside, and after a moment of quiet consideration, she observed that it appeared to be an ancient creature and not quite a soul beast. Lei looked disappointed and asked if that meant it was worthless. She gave him a stern look and scolded him for always thinking about money first. He mumbled that he needed money for cultivation resources and asked what she thought it was worth. She explained with a smile that the pouch was a special storage tool with great research value. It was a rare antique and worth at least 5 million coins. When she said this, Zhuan Yu and Lei were both stunned, with their mouths hanging open in shock. Lei loudly wondered if the pouch was really worth 5 million Federation coins. Luo Hong held the pouch carefully in her hand, shook her head and said she couldn't put a price on it. Lei was disappointed and wondered how something she seemed so interested in could turn out to be worthless. He had thought it was a treasure. Before he could complain more, she scolded him that he didn't get it. She explained that it wasn't worthless. It was actually priceless. Lei was taken aback, and his surprise was obvious. As she saw his reaction, she continued to say that even a small piece of life ivy was super valuable, and this pouch had at least 10 times that. So, she couldn't put a price on it. However, Lei still wasn't satisfied. He complained that without a price or money it seemed useless. Zhuan Yu interrupted them and asked what life ivy was. Luo Hong turned to him and said not to underestimate its value. She began explaining its history. about how life ivy had thrived in the heart of the great Stardew Forest since ancient times, back when ferocious beasts roamed freely near the Lake of Life. In those days, the beasts relied on the ivy to survive cataclysms, restore their life force, and extend their lifespans. The saying went, for every inch of life ivy, a century was added to one's life, and with just 1 inch consumed would grant a person an extra 100 years. No wonder that life ivy was considered beyond any monetary value. Lay's mind raced when he heard this, and he couldn't help but drool at the thought. He stared in awe and guessed that this piece must be worth at least 30,000 years of life. Xuan Yu, just as amazed, pointed out how strong it must be. Luo Hong saw their reactions and was glad they were finally starting to understand how valuable it was. But she brought them back down to reality, as she told them not to get too excited just yet. There was still something off about the vine, and she needed to check it out further to make sure it was really life ivy. After a while, old Shu walked in and joked that he had been going out more often these days because the students had become too weak to bother him. He looked at Luo Hong and asked if she felt the same way. Even though she stayed calm on the outside, she was pretty annoyed inside since she still had to deal with the outer court students' nonsense. She didn't even want to answer him, so she just gave a polite nod while keeping her frustration inside. Meanwhile, Lei and Xuan Yu welcomed old Shu respectfully. Happy with their politeness, old Shu asked when they were planning to go back to Sea God Lake for more cultivation and said he would like to help them out. Xuan Yu, a bit unsure if he really meant it, mentioned that he was planning to exchange for an hour there that night. Old Shu asked what he was planning to exchange for and offered to give him special approval. Before Xuan Yu could answer, Luo Hong cut in and told old Shu to explain life ivy to the boys. Old Shu looked confused for a moment, then asked if Lei had found some of it. Luo Hong confirmed it and mentioned that he was her student. Old Shu told Lei he was lucky. Lei felt a bit embarrassed as he scratched his head and mumbled that he hadn't even reached 3 rings yet. Old Shu told him that the life ivy pouch he had found was a big deal for their life school, but before Lei could get too excited, he warned him that it wasn't a miracle, as this ivy wouldn't extend life. It was just the roots of life ivy, and it's good for storing energy, but not much else. He then shared a secret with Lei that the little gorilla he had been worried about was still alive. It had come from another plane as a baby, and its life force was strong. Lei felt a sense of relief and happiness as he said how great it was that the little guy wasn't dead after all. Old Shu told him that he could help wake up the young gorilla if he wanted. A spark of hope lit up in Lei's eyes, and he eagerly asked if Old Shu knew how strong the creature could become. Old Shu admitted he wasn't sure yet and explained that as the gorilla grew, it would go through many changes, making it hard to predict what it might turn into. Lei's excitement grew as he realized the possibilities. If the little gorilla accepted him as its master, it could grow into a powerful creature that could fight, heal, or even defend him one day. Old Shu nodded and confirmed that he could indeed make the gorilla recognize Lei as its master. Without wasting a moment, he urged Old Shu to go ahead and thanked him sincerely. Old Shu agreed to help, but warned him that it wouldn't be easy. He told him that it would require 8 top-quality items, each at least 10,000 years old, plus some black insignias as payment. Shocked by the cost, Lei asked what would happen if he didn't awaken the creature. Old Shu replied that, if that was the case, he could always give the gorilla to the Federation for research. They might awaken it, or they could turn it into a specimen, which would still have some value. At the mention of turning the gorilla into a specimen, Lei's face filled with worry. Old Shu looked at him and asked what he planned to do. Without hesitating, he said he wanted to wake the gorilla, but admitted he didn't have enough black insignias to offer him. Old Shu reminded him that he had an ivy pouch. Lei glanced at Xuan Yu for advice, but Xuan Yu felt stuck and couldn't move. Just as confused, Lei muttered to himself, unsure of what to do. In a moment of desperation, he blurted out that he'd sell the pouch. Before he could even think it through, Old Shu disappeared as he told him to meet him the next day in Eternal Sky City once everything was ready. Qian Lei stood there stunned when Luo Hong yelled at him for agreeing so quickly and said he had lost his mind. He felt hurt by her words along with her punch and complained that she hadn't stopped him either. She told him as she tried to stay calm that she couldn't help because of the Academy's rules. Xuan Yu also criticized him, as he said that he had been too quick to agree and that Old Shu probably meant the pouch could be traded for something better. Lei groaned in frustration and explained that he had nodded because he couldn't help himself, and Old Shu showing up in person had made him think it was really important. As tears of regret filled his eyes, he turned to Luo Hong and begged for advice on what to do next. She slammed the door as she lost her patience and told him not to come back. Lei felt defeated, so he collapsed and clung to Xuan Yu's legs. He said he really needed help. With a sigh, Xuan Yu suggested that Lei should pretend to be poor the next day and ask Old Shu for more rewards. He thought Old Shu wouldn't completely turn him down, and a glimmer of hope appeared in Lei's teary eyes. Hui thanked Xuan Yu as he told him that his martial soul had evolved, likely through his second awakening linked to his bloodline. He wasn't scared of Xuan Yu anymore and felt genuinely happy for the first time in a long while. Xuan Yu smiled warmly as he was glad to see his friend doing well. Just then, Feng walked into the classroom and apologized for being late. Xuan Yu felt a weird, happy sensation, almost like his bloodline was reacting to his arrival. Qi waved off Feng's lateness, told him to sit down, and reminded everyone that class was about to start. Xuan Yu asked Feng if he was all right. Feng's eyes were sparkling with excitement as he showed Xuan Yu his hand, which was covered in shiny scales. He proudly told Xuan Yu that he had succeeded. Xuan Yu examined the scales closely and felt a strange sense of déjà vu. They reminded him of the dream he had the night before, where he saw a huge, powerful white dragon. It suddenly clicked to him that the scales on Feng's hand were like those of the dragon from his dream. After class, Xuan Yu pulled Lei aside and told him the surprising details about Feng's scales. Once Lei processed it, he clinged to Xuan Yu and started crying that he wished he had something like that too. A group of nearby girls noticed and giggled as they whispered that there seemed to be something special going on between the two of them. Xuan Yu gave Lei a light smack on the head and told him he was being ridiculous. He said he couldn't even think straight on an empty stomach and insisted they finish lunch before he complained anymore. Meanwhile, Qi asked Feng to join him, and he agreed right away. On the other hand, Lei suggested to Xuan Yu that they head back to the dorm. As they headed toward the dorm, Lei told Xuan Yu that he wasn't afraid of pain or hard work anymore and suggested they hit the stimulation cabin for some practice. Just then, Mengqin showed up and interrupted them. She told Xuan Yu that Xiu was missing from class that day, and despite her efforts, she hadn't been able to reach out to her. So she decided to visit Xiu and asked if Xuan Yu wanted to come along. Xuan Yu remembered that Xiu had mentioned a headache the day before, but she seemed fine when she returned to school. He suggested they ask the teacher to open her dorm to check on her. Mengqin explained to him that they couldn't do that because of the vital sign alarm system. However, she was still determined to see if Xiu was okay. Xuan Yu agreed to go with her, and Lei, eager to be involved, insisted on coming along too.